Welcome to Floyd Street's Finest. He is Holy Cross head coach, former Louisville assistant Mark Lieberman. I am Jack Grossman. Thanks for tuning in. Floyd Street's Finest, part of the Field of 68 Podcast Network. You can find us on Twitter. He's at Coach Lieberman. I'm at Jack Grossman 97. I'm on Blue Sky as well. Jack Grossman. Like, subscribe, do all that stuff. YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Twitter, however you're consuming this. We really appreciate that. Coach, we got a bracket. We got a bracket, and we got picks to make today. How you been, man?
I'm great. I actually sang on Drew Diener's show. It's the most wonderful time of the year. I'm not going to repeat that. I just worded it, but I wasn't going to sing it. It's euphoria for the next few weeks. Even championship week is the best. So it's a great time. Look, the first four last night, we have just an incredible ending to the St. Francis Alabama State game. So here we go. And of course, what does North Carolina do? Come out and win by 70.
Yeah, I'll say this, and I went out like staunchly against them being in the field, and I believe every word of that still. And I'm of the belief of what you do in the NCAA tournament or in the playoff after that on the football side does not change what your resume was and whether you should have been included or not. But I will give Hubert Davis this: the two times throughout his coaching career that people have just completely sold off on Carolina and just dismissed them, that's when they've been at their best, man. Then when they made that run to the title games at 8 seed in 2022, and then obviously how they played last night. So you got to give them credit there. When people count them out, they usually end up rallying. That's what we saw last night.
Happens a lot of times in this game, especially when you feel slighted. And that's whatever you can use to get your guys going. It certainly was the case last night. But yeah, look, a good San Diego State team, not a great San Diego State team, and they just took them out to the woodshed. Now, of course, what do people do? Now they start poo-pooing the Mountain West, and now the ACC is better than we think.
Yep, that's how it goes, man. That's it. Oh, I love the good old overreactions. It's always hilarious. So, Coach, let's do this, because Phil Baker and I did a podcast where we ranted for about an hour and 15 minutes about the selections and all that stuff. But so I want to spend the bulk of this one previewing Louisville Creighton, and then also just kind of looking at the rest of the bracket and making our picks on that end. But just quickly, what were your thoughts on Louisville? Kind of, did you think they were snubbed like most of the rest of us thought that as an 8 seed, or just
Yeah, I do. But at the same time, having been in this business and knowing that, look, I was part of teams that didn't get the seeding they liked, and no one's going to be happy. It wasn't a great seed, but it's certainly not going to be something that Coach Kelsey, after it happened and after the initial reaction and not being happy about it, now you move on. And that's what you do. Your guys now, whatever it is that you're going to fuel your team, you got to win. You got to win games, and every team is going to be good. Even if you're a 5 and you're playing McNeese State, and I've watched tons of their games, that's a good team. So look, Creighton's a good team. They're out without Pop Isaacs. They've been out with him for a while. They're very similar in a lot of ways, and we can get into that. But I don't think it's a matchup. Look, if people were talking about it over the last couple of years and said, well, you're going to be an 8 seed, they would have given the left arm to be in the NCAA tournament, be an 8 seed, and you're basically have a chance to play a home game. And if you can win that, you get a chance to play the number 1 team, and that's exciting for these guys. These guys are ramped up. You get to play a Creighton and then possibly an Auburn. What's better than that?
Nothing's better than that. This is what we live for going into the NCAA tournament. So let's start here. Where do you see those similarities between the two teams?
I'll tell you this: you watch Creighton play. They're so efficient offensively. Some of their actions are very. You're watching some things that you'll see a Louisville team done. A lot of Spain actions, a lot of different ways to get into their Spain actions. A lot of ball screens, but just not guys standing still movement. Setting backside and hammer screens on the opposite side, utilizing their big in a myriad of ways, and they space the floor very well and they shoot the ball very well. They're not as aggressive a defensive team, I think, but they're solid. You watch them; they're in great position. What Coach McDermott does a really good job of is he's a coach that is going to really study Louisville's defense and figure out ways they want to attack it. And they want to figure out what they can do. And if that's continually moving James Scott away from the basket, they run a lot of double high screens. They run a lot of different actions. And they play a lot 4-round 1 as well. And it's not always, just trying to get Kalkbrenner around the rim. And again, I'll butcher some names, so just you'll have to bear with me. I always do. I like to go as a coach. Rick Pitino was a big numbers guy. What's number 11 doing? What's number 5 doing? I'm the same way, but I think for the most part, Ashworth and Neal and McAndrews and Green, I think I'll be okay. But look, they play a lot of 4-round-1, and Louisville does the same thing. They might look at matchups, and if Rain Smith's in, and we saw that with some teams, post him and get him into a situation where, you're running a chin action or you're slicing a guy to the basket and spacing guys out and putting some shooters around them. So it's going to be intriguing, but I think McDermott does a good job of that. And we've certainly learned this year, Jack, how good Pat Kelsey is as far as devising a plan to attack the other team.
Yeah, you see why this game's going to be the first game of the tournament where you have two of the best offensive minds in the sport. You're going to have a really, really electric atmosphere over in Lexington, being so close to Louisville. And it's going to be one of the more aesthetically pleasing games of the first round. I really think that because of how great these two teams are at scheming things up on the offensive end, because of the playmakers and the shooting ability on both sides of the ball, and because you have dudes like a Ryan Kalkbrenner, like a Chucky Hepburn, like a Terrence Edwards that can go out and give you 30, 35 on any given night. It's great. So I do, from a Louisville side, because they are going to involve Kalkbrenner a lot of different ways, both as a screen setter. He can pick and pop a little bit. He can hit threes. If he's shooting a bunch of threes, you live with that for Louisville, but they can also get him into dribble handoffs, put him on the block, post him up a bunch. That's going to be the key thing. James Scott is a guy that's really going to have to stay out of foul trouble because we haven't even gotten to Kalkbrenner's impact on the defensive end yet. But just offensively, he's really the only guy that is a little bit of a matchup for Kalkbrenner that you can trust to go one-on-one because, yeah, you can double and stunt and hedge like we saw them do a lot against Maxine Raynaud in those two games against Stanford. The difference is, though, Creighton has a bunch of guys that can burn you and put the ball in the hoop if you end up doubling. So it's going to be the great, choice that Pat Kelsey's going to have to make. I expect him to mix up coverages a bunch, try to give him a bunch of different looks. But Kalkbrenner's a guy that's been in college for 5 years. So you're not going to throw anything at him that he hasn't seen on that end of the floor. So how would you try to go about defending Kalkbrenner and trying to play that yin and yang with you don't want to overhelp and overcommit to him because Creighton really wants to burn you from behind the arc?
Well, that's the thing, and they're very creative on offense, and they're very prudent about when they're going to run because they trust themselves in the half court. And whether he sets tons of look. Last I watched 3 other games, he averaged 15 flare screens set by him with Kalkbrenner, and again, then when he sets that flare. Then he rolls, and again, you have to occupy, and you're really having to guard 2 or 3 different actions. And then again, they always get into a 4-round-1. It's not always with him, but I think they're going to really emphasize because of James Scott not being to the point where maybe as physical, and he loves to block shots, and maybe putting him in a position where it's an interesting little dynamics here in chess game to see if he's going to front the post, and he's done a pretty good job of doing that. And sometimes they get in actions where you're going to have to switch those actions. I think Terrence Edwards and some of those guys can be real physical, and you have to move him off his spot because he loves to hold that spot, especially on the right block, and really look for over the top, and they do a pretty good job of that. But you're not just going to be where 4-round-1 and they're ball watching. That's why I said they're similar to Louisville. You're getting actions. You're getting a pin down on the weak side. You're getting a hammer screen. You're getting different things where they occupy defenders. So that's the tough part. I think if they're going to what Louisville does really well, Jack, is they pressure the ball. Yes. And your best post defender is ball pressure. So when you can do that, that's the key. Now, you can't let an Ashworth or a Neal start driving. Those guys are seniors, and those are really good players. So if they start creating and that kind of stuff, it takes bodies off bodies. But I think what Louisville does really well is their ball pressure and their gap integrity. So the key to guarding Kalkbrenner in the post is really not so much on James Scott. It's on the perimeter guys to really trace the face, bother the basketball, and do their jobs.
I think those guys like Ashworth and Neal especially, they can beat you one-on-one. They can create their own shot a little bit, but if you're Louisville and you're able to defend the actions, keep the ball out of Kalkbrenner's hands, and it ends up being Ashworth or Neal trying to drive one-on-one when the possession's broken down on Hepburn or Terrence Edwards or Hadley, you've won the possession. I think that's the goal here. Creighton can create a little bit off the bounce, but that's really where they miss Pop Isaacs because he was that dude that was the athlete that really brought that other dimension that they've
No doubt.
had. When you think of them being a top 3, 4 seed, like they've been the last couple of years, being the Sweet 16 Elite Eight, like they've been the past couple of years, they've had a dude like Pop Isaacs. They've had Ryan hard on the roster, or Arthur Kaluma a couple years ago
Hmm.
as well. They've had that type of dude. The reason they're on the 9 line this year is frankly because the guy that was supposed to be that hasn't been there for 80% of the year. So much of this for Louisville is you got to be disciplined and stay composed on on the defensive side of the floor, and you have to really make them try to beat you one-on-one. That's where I think you have the chance to make your most success, if you're able to take away the ball movement and a lot of the stuff they like to do.
And another part of that is, I think Creighton's a very efficient and good defensive team, but this is where Louisville's offense can help their defense. Because if you limit the chances for Ashworth getting out and running and opportunities in transition where they set tons of random ball screens in transition, but if you can get away from that, where your offense helps your defense, where you're getting to the foul line, you're scoring, you're getting easy baskets, or you're taking good shots, then you can get back and get set. And you're right. You're not going to have guys that are just, wow, this guy's just going to blow by us and we're just going to have to be aware. Where you can really, where they can really when we talk about pressuring the ball, they can really crowd them and understand, you know what? Yeah, it's going to be a situation where a guy like Ashworth, if he does get by you, well, he's not a guy that's overly athletic where he's going to, he's creative, but when he drives and paint touches, he's looking to kick out. And so with the recovery of that, you're really not overly concerned. Look, the freshman McAndrews is a good shooter, but you can get out to him as well. So I don't think it's a situation where a blow-by is going to absolutely just defeat what you're trying to do conceptually on the defensive end.
Agreed. And one last thing to add on that, Louisville a lot of times pressures the ball in the half court. They're able to get some turnovers off of that. I wouldn't fully expect to create a bunch of turnovers in this game just because Creighton does a really, really good job taking care of the ball. But even if you're not forcing turnovers, that can't be a reason to get discouraged on there, because that ball pressure, as you said, can apply and help that defense in so many other ways, even if you're not ending up turning them over 15, 16 times.
And you have arrested Chucky Hepburn.
Yes.
So that's going to be an absolute look. It would be interesting, again, talking about what they're doing and what they're looking at from a scouting standpoint and putting in their schemes and whatnot. Putting in Ashworth in a lot of situations where he's going to be in a ball screen or situations. I expect him, again, they run him off chins, they run him off flares. I think they're going to run Chucky off a lot of actions rather than just putting him in just straight ball screens, just because that's Chucky's MO. He knows how to blow up those plays and take away what you're trying to run. So I think there's going to be a lot more creativity, changing the angles on screens. Creighton does a pretty good job of that. So yeah, I can see them just doing different things where, whether Ashworth's coming off handoffs or coming off a pin down on the other side to get into their stuff, and whether it's getting Kalkbrenner into the post different ways. Yeah, I think they're going to be a little more creative, and that's what McDermott does very well.
And then on the other side of the floor, the big thing I'm looking at and it is Ryan Kalkbrenner defensively. I mean, there's only been two dudes to win Defensive Player of the Year in the Big East 4 times. It's him and Patrick Ewing. That's pretty good company, Kalkbrenner and Patrick
Too
Ewing.
shabby.
And what makes him so good is that they're going to play that drop coverage and pick and roll, and they're going to plant him under the basket, and they're going to try to funnel everything into him because Creighton doesn't force a lot of turnovers. They want you to kind of shoot over them is kind of their MO. They don't foul either. Kalkbrenner's literally never fouled out of a game in his college career, which is absolutely insane to think about with how much teams try to challenge him underneath the rim. It is really, really, really tough. I'm not gonna say impossible, but it is incredibly tough to get all the way to the rim and finish over Ryan Kalkbrenner at all, but especially at a consistent rate. So you look at Louisville, how do you try to know that Creighton's going to try to funnel everything into Kalkbrenner, and it's going to be a little bit of a struggle. Louisville likes to get those lobs to James Scott. They like to get Edwards or Hepburn all the way to the rim. Do you see them trying to pivot more to maybe pulling up a little bit more of like mid-range floater game, trying to set everything else up? I know getting Rain Smith back and adding that floor spacing will help as well. But how would you want Pat Kelsey's team to try to attack Creighton's defense, especially the Ryan Kalkbrenner effect?
Yeah, that's a great point because a lot of players who are in drop coverages, they're just doing that because they really can't guard certain things. Where in Kalkbrenner's situation, he's really good at stunting, showing, and being very deceptive defensively, and then walling up and being the second off the floor.
He stays vertical too.
Yeah, and you saw with Renard where he would get in foul trouble and not understanding, where they were able to compromise him quite a bit and get those lobs. So you make a great point. Look, he's going to be back there, and the way Chucky does a great job of snaking and navigating those ball screens, look, it's not the analytical approach that Pat Kelsey likes, but man, some of those mid-range shots are going to be there. Some of those floaters are going to be there. Some of those situations. And again, I probably see James Scott doing different things and not just setting flat ball screens or
I
just
see more
ball
dribble
screens.
handoff and zoom actions from
A
James
lot
Scott.
of dribble handoffs, a lot of zooms, a lot of movement, a lot of maybe, again, him pin downing for shooters on the opposite side where, you know what, if no one's showing on those actions, you can get a curl, you can get a pop, you can get different things. And you know what, it's that's going to be the part. And even if Waterman's on the floor with, and having another guy that can move and have a little length as well. So yeah, that's going to be the interesting part. I don't think they're going to completely change what they do, but they're just going to be just, again, to your point, and you're spot on. I just see a lot of zooms, a lot of DHOs, a lot of situations where James Scott's not just going to be short rolling or sprinting to the rim, where he's coming and setting pin downs for shooters, especially if you can get a wide pin down for Terrence Edwards, and then he's going to the rim, and then if you're going to get a help situation, then you have where you have kickouts and you have some shots. So I think also getting out and going, because look, Creighton's not playing, they're not as deep, and if you can get out and go and get some early baskets as well and get some in transition, and look, if Chucky's making shots, that's going to be really a situation where Creighton's might have to change a few things of what they're doing.
Yeah, I think one thing that Louisville can do, one thing to know, Creighton, not much of an offensive rebounding team. They very much don't send a lot of guys to the glass. They want to
No
get
doubt.
back to try to take you out of transition. But one thing, I'm just mainly just talking out of my ass here. But I could see Louisville like running Rain Smiths off floppies and maybe doing like a pick and pop with Waterman or Edwards as kind of the pick man to try to get Kalkbrenner in that choice of, okay, Chucky Hepburn's driving downhill while Rain Smith's curling on the wing. I'm in drop coverage here. What do I take away and give up? Because you can't take all that away type of deal. To where I definitely think I like the idea of moving James Scott, not using him as the screener a lot in those high pick and rolls and having him do other things off the ball to try to put Kalkbrenner in different situations.
Yeah, and look, he's still an excellent screener, and what Chucky can do is a lot of different things and he uses his body well, and so. And again, I think they're both mad scientists when you talk about McDermott and Coach Kelsey, and we've learned and getting to see it firsthand what a great job he does is creating opportunities for his players to score. So you're going to see that. And whether it's, moving James Scott away from the basket and, again, putting in situations where Hadley and Terrence Edwards are posting, you're going to see still more of that. And if they're going to come off, then again, James Scott can go set a rip screen or a way screen, and you're bringing somebody else towards the basket that can shoot the basketball. So, look, there's different ways to counter, especially a team that just relies completely on where he's basically zoned out the entire time. There's different ways that you can do that to really put him in position where you're going to get open shots for your guys.
And again, one thing I want to emphasize again, because I know Louisville fans are going to get mad at it on Thursday. Creighton is the best team in the country at opponent free throw rate. What does that mean? They don't foul. Ryan Kalkbrenner stays vertical. He almost never fouls. Louisville plays a really aggressive defense. They end up fouling sometimes. So if you end up and you're in the first half and Louisville has 19 fouls and Creighton has 4, it's more than just the refs are trying to screw Louisville, guys. I promise you, Creighton is not aggressive defensively. They don't force a lot of turnovers, and they are as good as anyone in the nation at defending without fouling. Now, does that mean that Louisville can be comfortable offensively? I think this favors Louisville a lot in some ways, because you look at where they had struggles in Charlotte last week. It was, you think about Stanford mucking the game up. You think about Clemson mucking the game up, trying to impose their will physically. You think about where Duke turned the game in the second half. It was, I thought, when they slowed the game down, made it more of a half-court game, they stopped turning the ball over, and then they really imposed their will physically. Creighton's not a team that's going to do that. They're a pretty team. And I don't mean that as like they're soft, but they're not going to try to bang and grind out a game like a Clemson or Duke did last weekend, which I think helps Louisville from the standpoint of, look, you're not going to be physically just beaten down by the end of this one. It also helps that Louisville's not playing their third game in 3 days as well. They're going to be a little bit more rested there.
Yeah, they're a team that's built on movement,
Yes.
spacing, and creativity. And they do that pretty well. And when I say pretty well, they do it extremely well. Watch them against Connecticut and really just frustrated Connecticut with what they were trying to run. and almost forcing you to take tough twos or tough threes and that kind of stuff where, hey, we're not letting you get to the spots that you want. And look, they're really good at being the second off the floor as well, which means they're not jumping at shot fakes, which is what a Louisville MO is, especially with Edwards around the basket, even on the perimeter and so on. So, look, you're going to have a situation where if you can get out and go, you talked about it. They're Virginia-esque almost in sometimes where those guys, if they're just sprinting back and making sure. And part of being that is they know where the shots are coming from. They don't take bad shots. So when you take good shots, your offense is helping your defense, and they get set and they get back if they're not missing it. They're not going to crowd. They're not going to jam rebounds. So you're not going to have those opportunities. And so, look, if you can get some drag screens early on and where Chucky can come over and look and get an open three, or someone is, again, coming off a guy and you can make the extra pass and so on. And look, what they're going to get a taste of their own medicine because when you watch Creighton play, there's hammer screens on the backside all the time. Louisville is one of the best teams in the country at doing that. So when you're coming off those actions, if you're ball watching, look, you're getting screened in, and that opens up a Waterman. It opens up the other guys, Ryan Smith, and so on from those shots. And that, look, and another way to attack it is different things off the Spain because you can set some back screens. You can do some different things. James Scott can stay up top and really adjust his screen for Ryan Smith coming off those actions. But a lot of flips, a lot of other little actions that they can run. Look, they're very creative. So, I mean, my gosh, from an offensive standpoint, it's really good. I'm going to be dialed in to just see how they're attacking it from the get-go.
Are you going to the game Thursday?
I am not going to the game, Jack. Listen, I've been asked quite a few people. It is the holy day for me, Thursday and Friday. I just want to be close to a TV and just making sure I'm going to be watching it and enjoying it. But I also like to watch every little thing, rewind it, during a break and just see what worked, what didn't work. And then we got some other games coming on too.
Oh,
so
yes.
I just thought I want to be all set and making sure I'm enjoying my favorite 2 days of the year.
How much does the factor of this game being in Lexington and the fact that you're going to have a building full of Louisville fans in there? Louisville fans are bad at the 8 seed, obviously, but you end up getting Lexington to get some de facto home games pretty much. How much does that help them this weekend?
A lot. It's a huge part of it. There's no doubt. You're going to have to play in front of. Look, the way this town is abuzz with everything, and how many people are going to be there, and the red out and all that kind of stuff. It's fantastic. You're going to have so many fans there. It makes a difference. It's a huge part of it. Look, it's a sterile environment. Look, the 3 times I was in the NCAA tournament, look, we had fans there, but people are there just to watch basketball. Our time in Denver, our time in Seattle, like it's a strange environment because you're basically having basketball fans and they're really, it's
they want a good game more often than
not.
Yeah,
they just want to go see the teams and have a lot of rooting interest sometimes. It really is the case. Look, some fans travel all over the country. We get it. But in this situation, you're an hour away. You think you're not going to just – and the way this team has endeared themselves to this city, you don't think that place is just going to be packed. And look, the energy doesn't lie. And to feed off of that, that's a huge factor for this team to play it. Look, if you're going to be an 8 seed, but you get a chance to play in Lexington and get a chance to play in front of your home crowd, that is a distinct advantage for this Louisville basketball team. Don't mistake that in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, it's definitely expect Louisville to feed off that energy as well throughout the game too. I mean, that's something that we've seen a few times, because it's been brought up. Obviously, the 2013 team had those first 2 games in Lexington. They had 2 more in Indy. That's what happens. They're number 1 overall seed. You get those 4 games,
right?
But I compare it more to 2 things. One, 2 years ago when Auburn was playing in Birmingham in the 8-9 game, they played Houston. It's funny how the roles kind of reverse on that, how they kind of got that de facto home game. But also in 2007, when Louisville was a 6 seed and they drew the Lexington pod and they ended up playing Billy Gillispie and AC Law and Texas A&M, and And to where that Louisville team, it was that core group like Terrence Williams, Earl Clark, Paget that kind of fueled the two Elite Eight runs the next couple of years. They were kind of just coming up then, but they played above their heads a little bit in that second round game. Edgar Sosa drops 31, 34, something like that. They almost end up winning that game. And you saw to where having that de facto home crowd can really help you in a tournament setting like that. And I think that can be one of the reasons why I think Louisville's going to get by Creighton on Thursday. It's definitely not a gimme. It's very much closer to a 50-50 toss-up game, but I think that is a variable that you just can't ignore in this spot, to where I really think that's going to help Louisville a lot on Thursday. And if they get to Saturday, trying to stay competitive with an absolute beast at Auburn on Saturday.
There's a big difference between pumping your fist to your teammates into the bench during a game than raising and trying to get the crowd involved. That's a huge difference. You watch the NCAA tournament, how many guys are pumping their fists to their teammates and to the bench because, hey, the mantra is it's us against the world and we're going in there and we're gonna shock it. No, you're gonna have, for lack of a better way of putting it, you might have a home game, and so you're gonna be. You see the players, they're going to be just getting everybody excited. You're going to hear it on television, where a lot of times we talked about it being sterile. Like you go to these, especially those 12 o'clock games, right? You got people funneling in and they're getting ready and they're wearing jerseys from or shirts for the next game and whatnot. And people are just ready for the NCAA tournament. Watch it. You've got to, it's not always sold out. It's not always packed for those 12 o'clock games and whatnot. Look at this situation. You're going to have, Rupp, I imagine it to be quite a few people there. You're going to have tons of, I'm sure, Auburn fans, but you're going to have Louisville fans there and Auburn ready to watch, who they're playing. I think it's going to be a great atmosphere, which is unlike usually the first game to tip off the NCAA tournament. This is going to be a little different than what we're used to.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. And again, that's part of the reason why I think it is the first game of the weekend, just because I'm going to mute my phone here real quick because I'm sick of hearing that buzzing noise. That's happened twice in the last 30 seconds. There we go. My bad there. So let's do this, Coach. I want to go through just kind of the bracket. We're not going to go game by game or anything because we don't have time for that.
Before we do that, Jack, I have a quick question for you.
Go for it.
Like when I was a kid, did you on Thursdays and Fridays, did you miss school?
So my parents never let me miss school, but I was very much, I know. I have a few vivid memories. Number one, I was in third grade. That 2007 pod when Louisville played Texas A&M in the second round, they played Stanford and the Lopez twins in the first round, and that was a similar situation where I don't know if it was the first game, it was one of the first games, but I remember as a way to make it educational, they rolled in the TVs like they used to, and my third grade teacher, Miss Young, she printed off box scores and she had us tally who scored all the points as a way to make it a math, which was great. All
right, shout out to Miss Young then.
Yes,
that's great.
But I remember that. I remember watching the Louisville Morehead State game in 2011 when in one of my sixth grade teachers' room right after middle school ended. Obviously, that was not as fun. But then
it wasn't.
I remember when I was a junior in high school, because when I was in high school, by that point, this was like 2012, or 2013, 2014, 2015, where you had enough to where you could watch it on your phones, or like if I had some classes or laptops, we would turn it on like desktops and stuff. I remember I was sitting in my Algebra 2 class, and it was the last period of the day, and everyone was just trying to sneak and watch the Ohio State-Dayton game in 2014 with Aaron Kraft, Archie Miller, that game. And my Algebra 2 teacher was a huge basketball guy, huge Louisville fan. And he's trying to teach because, they gave us like the big mandate of don't just have the kids watch games and all that stuff that no one follows. But finally, he just kind of throws his hands up in the air and he goes, "What's the score, guys?" And someone just shouts, "Dayton's up 1, 8 minutes left." And he says, "Fuck it, we're putting it on the projector."
Love it.
So, honestly, I would have loved to have been home from school, but part of the fun for me was trying to find the ways to watch it and get away and feel like you're getting away with something. And it was kind of like team everyone together, and especially if Louisville or Kentucky had one of those early games, all bets are off. Just everyone was just kind of watching at school, which was great.
No doubt. That's great.
Were you a watch at home guy or?
Oh yeah, listen, the NFL draft and the first 2 days of the tournament, no school. That was a rule. I established that when I was very young. Told my parents, nope, no school those 2 days in the NFL draft. I'm home.
Yep.
So yes,
You're good. There's one thing
yeah, I have my priorities right.
yeah,
So
yeah. You don't argue with Marcy Grossman. If she says you're going to school, there's not much you can
I get
do
it.
on that front. But Coach, let's go through here. Again, we're not gonna go game by game. But what are a couple things that you're looking at just at the bracket, how you're approaching this, and just anything that stands out for you on this?
Well, I mean, look, it's every year you go through it, and you're like, you try and predict what team's going to get an upset
It's
because
impossible.
it's impossible. And you look at it because the chalk here, it looks really good. All the chalk teams look fantastic, and then I say, okay, I've watched some of these teams and quite a few of these teams play. I love to watch Drake and their different style of basketball. It's complete dichotomy of what you're going to see, like against Missouri and so on. Some early games, like I really liked Arizona, how they played against Houston. And look, they're playing a really good Akron team. So for me, that's a fun game because I think Arizona could make some noise, but I think Akron can win that game.
Yeah.
But I think if Arizona wins, I think they're going to the Sweet 16. So, I think they can make some noise. I think they're well coached. They've got some great guard play. So to me, Arizona could lose in the first round. They can get beat by Akron, or they can make the Elite Eight.
I'll give you my team that's like that. BYU. I currently have BYU in the Elite Eight. However, I am terrified of that first round game for them with BCU.
Oh, yeah.
How physical they are, how defensive minded they are, how much BYU's a rhythm team, and BCU just blows up everything you would ever want rhythm wise. That's a really, really tough game there. But then I look at it like this because I was filling out because my night on Sunday went shocked about Louisville. Then holy crap, the double whammy of North Carolina getting in. Usually, whereas I'm filling out a bracket right as the selection show ends, I didn't get to doing that until around 9 p.m., which is incredibly rare. But I'm looking at it, and I had the Elite Eight matchups, and I'm going into the Final Four, and I'm like, crap. I have all 4 1 seeds in the Final Four right now, and now I'm just kind of second guessing everything I'm looking at, and that's kind of where I've been the last couple of days. But there's 2 things. One, Auburn, Florida, Duke, and Houston, the 4 1 seeds, all have net ratings on KenPom of over 35, which tells you how great of a year this is in college basketball. Because in the 25 previous years of KenPom, 1999 through 2024, we had 6 total teams have a net rating over 35. All 6 of those teams, by the way, made at least the Final Four. So they've done really good for themselves. So if you're going by that trend, you could put all 1 seed in the Final Four. However, that's only happened once in the NCAA tournament, 2008. And you can't be the guy to put all 4 1 seeds in the Final Four, man.
You can't be that guy.
So I've tweaked it a little bit, but I'm still just sitting here wondering, like, where do the 1 seeds lose before the Final Four in this? Because I think that is an incredibly tough question outside of Florida, who I think is playing the best basketball of any of the 1 seeds.
Yeah, that's my pick to win it all.
And that's currently my pick to win it all as well. But I look at, getting either an Oklahoma or a UConn in the second round, or a Maryland in the Crab 5 in the Sweet 16, or St. John's in the Elite 8. No one has a path like that. I mean, but I look at like Auburn. Where's Auburn losing in this field? Unless like Louisville's able to ride the emotions of, again, playing that de facto home game and being able to play by far their best game of the year. But I just have a tough time seeing them handle that physicality. I kind of think the 4 and 5 seeds implode in that bracket. Does Michigan State beat them? I
don't think so. I love what Tom Izzo's done this year, but that's not a team that's going to overwhelm you. I just think going through it and looking at the South, for me, it's going to be an SEC team that's going to beat Auburn, whether it's Texas A&M, whether it's going to be Ole Miss getting there. I think those are the teams that are capable of beating an Auburn because they're so familiar with them. And I really think those are the only teams, to me, that can knock off an Auburn at this point.
Yeah, but what you're telling me, but like if I'm picking Auburn or A&M, like A&M won the first game, they did, but it was at A&M. It was right after Auburn had clinched the regular season. Auburn, I believe, beat Ole Miss. Well, they did in the SEC tournament, but I think they did in the regular season as well. If you're telling me those are the two teams that can beat Auburn, and Auburn was the team that they've been incredible all year, but the fact they lost three of their last four, I was kind of prepared to fade them. But then I see the bracket, I'm like, I just kind of don't see where they're losing in that region, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. I picked them. I picked them to go to the Final Four. I took. I got one. Look, I'd love to have picked St. John's, but Florida to me is just so darn good. And I love Houston. I think this is the
Yeah.
best Houston team he's
And
had.
I think Houston got a great draw as well. Other than
Yeah, look,
Gonzaga in the 8-9 games difficult, but
it's
you,
difficult, but I don't think they're gonna look. I've watched Georgia play, and Gonzaga's good. I don't see that being an issue. And look,
right.
Clemson's decent. Purdue's not what they were. I think that's a roll for them to the Elite Eight. And then you're going to talk about, okay, is Tennessee going to do a Tennessee and somehow not get there? And all of a sudden, it's a walk in the park for Houston. So it's hard. It really is to say, okay, which number one seed? To me, maybe Duke is the most vulnerable because of the injuries. As good as they've looked in the ACC tournament, you've got some of those teams that like you mentioned, BYU and Arizona, Wisconsin playing really good, Alabama if Nelson can play. So maybe you're in a situation where Duke can, if Cooper Flagg's not right, because I think they need him to win it. But man, I mean, how can you go against the chalk? To be honest
So
with you.
did you have all four one seeds then in the Final Four?
Well, here's my out. Here's my way of escaping this. I don't fill out your traditional bracket. I look at it. I go over it. So I don't post a bracket. I never post
You
a
gotta
bracket
post
online.
a bracket.
I've got my internal bracket. I've got the teams that I like. I was at the dentist this morning. They had me fill out a bracket because it's like a $50 off for your next visit. So I filled one out, but I put my initials rather than my full name because I don't really fill one out. And I went with chalk, Jack. I went with chalk. I mean, it's really hard because look, you just don't know where. Look, an Akron team, and you mentioned VCU. VCU is really good, and
Yeah.
I think Akron is really good. But it's hard, It just, my gosh. What team? But every year, Jack, we're going to have somebody that's going to surprise us.
Yes.
There's going to be a team, whether it's maybe a New Mexico, even though I think they're playing a tough first game. I mean, look, you've got Marquette in the first round, but and if Iowa State was healthy,
agreed.
I would really, but losing one of their best guys in Gilbert, and then look, Lipscomb, they're going to get past them. Lipscomb can score, but they're not very sound defensively. But then it's just a tough thing for them. And then you're going against probably Ole Miss and a real physical team and athletic. So Iowa State I loved until they had the injury bug.
I had them in that group until the injuries as well, man. That's a tough one. One more question for you. In the Midwest, the bottom half of the Midwest, you mentioned Tennessee. That pod is kind of like the teams that I had decided I wasn't going to trust, and then they threw them all together. But I mean, you got Tennessee, Kentucky, Illinois, all down there, and I have Xavier going to the Elite Eight out of that group. And that's something I don't feel good about at all. but who out of those groups of teams do you think you can trust to, kind of what I think will end up being a sacrificial lamb to Houston in the Elite Eight? Hey, not that I'm saying they can't give them a game. I think they would. I just think Houston's better than any of those teams.
Yeah, I like Texas tonight. So who knows?
Trey Johnson's a baller. I mean, Trey Johnson, Kaluma, Trevon Mark. I mean, that was the other thing. Like, I have Xavier right now, but I think I could see Texas winning.
Man, I watched Texas during the SEC tournament, and I like their group. Man, they're talented. Now, you know how this goes. Illinois, I just don't trust them. I just think they just can't get stops. And look, Purdue is just. Look, High Point can knock off Purdue. High Point can score.
I have High Point beating Purdue.
Yeah. And so, look, Clemson, I think they're going to pass McNeese. I think McNeese is not they're talented, but they're not a team that I'm very high on.
Right. And Clemson's going to miss Dylan Hunter, too. I think they get by McNeese, they're going to miss him. Yeah, at some point, they're going to miss Dylan Hunter.
No question. But, again, like you look at that group, maybe Kentucky, honestly, maybe them. I mean, because
with the injuries and the defensive issues, I don't trust them. But at the same time, it's like if they escape the first week and they're playing Tennessee, they've already beaten Tennessee twice shorthanded this year.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so you could see it. Illinois is a team, if they actually did get their crap together and could put together consistently, that's the thing. You don't trust them to do it more than once or
No,
twice, but
right.
they have as high of a ceiling as anyone
Oh yeah,
when
no
they play well.
doubt.
Yeah.
But they could play well, but if they're not scoring, then they're done. And
Yeah.
that's a team that's offensive sensitive. So if they're not scoring, they're not making shots, they're done. I've always been a Rick. I like this Tennessee team. I think they have all the pieces, but it's just something. It's just you just don't know. I mean, look, that team is they've got great guard play. They've got wings. They've got what you need. But you know how this goes. I mean, they're going to be struggling with Wofford. I mean,
Yeah.
that's just how they play. So we will see. And like you said, Kentucky can get past them. So I see Kentucky getting to the point where it's Kentucky Houston, and I don't.
Yeah.
And I just don't think that that's going to be something that Houston's going to struggle with.
Yeah, I agree. Well, I like one last thing for you is we got to ask about this. Patino and Cal in the same pod. And Bill Self as well. But if it ends up being Patino and Calipari, I have St. John's in my Elite Eight losing to Florida because, again, as we said, like Florida's the best team in the country right now.
Mm-hmm.
But what do you think of kind of the mind games there of breaking out kind of the ghosts of past? Because I said it with Phil on Monday. The only thing Rick Pitino didn't do on the court consistently at Louisville was beat John Calipari, and that's he clearly has the better team. I don't even know if Arkansas gets by Kansas, to be honest with you. But if you see that matchup again, is there anything to worry about, like the old demons in the closet there?
So when I was an assistant coach at Louisville for the 2 years, every time we were getting ready to play Kentucky, a game before we would play them, they would play 2 to 3 minutes of a zone defense, which they would never play the rest of the year. They would never put in. And we would spend at least 5 hours preparing for a zone defense.
The Tony Barbie zone.
Yes. So no matter what, look, if they have a comfortable lead or they feel they're going to beat Kansas, watch them put in a 1-3-1 or put in something that's going to make Steve Masiello pull his hair out as he's trying to prep for that game. But my gosh, look, that's going to be fun. I'd love to see the Arkansas St. John's game.
Yeah, there's one game I want to see. It's that. I do think St. John's would get the better of them, but
Bland's back, and he's a good player. And look, you talk about a talented team. I mean, my gosh,
they're loaded with talent.
Just loaded. They just don't play together, and they just schematically, it's all over the place. But those teams are dangerous, and a team like that, I mean, we'll see. But that'd be fun. That'd be fun viewing on a. To try and catch that one, that would be a blast.
That'd be made for TV for sure. But
it'd be a nice Sunday game. It would be fantastic. I believe that's on Sunday. No,
I think Saturday. That'd be Saturday.
So perfect. Yes.
So it'll be. I guarantee you the Saturday, day pod that they'll have. It's. I would be stunned if it wasn't either the Lexington pod with the Louisville Auburn and that kind of thing that ends up happening. Or St. John's versus either Arkansas or Kansas. Like the storylines, man, are so good with both of those. So get ready for some early tips again, Coach. Coach, so you got you do have the 4-1 seeds in the Final Four then, and then Florida winning it all.
Sure, Jack. I will, because it's you and I love you, buddy. I'm gonna have to say that it's all chalk. It's all chalk from my end, and something will happen because it never just goes true the form. Yep. But we will see. Those teams are just too damn good. The only team I think might have a chance to get knocked off is, for me, if Arizona, I think, might have a chance to beat Duke. That, to me, is the only thing that I see that could happen.
I think Maryland over Florida is the one that I look at just because
they're good.
They're really good. They're really athletic, but I think Florida's just too deep for them in the long run. St. John's, I think, could give them a good fight in the Elite Eight, but again, Florida just has more shot makers, and they've played that type of team before in a Tennessee, and they've handled it to where I'm with you. I have Florida, Duke, and Houston. I did go Michigan State over Auburn in the Elite Eight. We've seen Auburn. They just lost to Tennessee, very similar type of team like that. And even when they beat Tennessee, it was at home, lower scoring game to where I could see And again, I'm reaching for straws here because I just can't, on principle, have all 4 1 seeds in the Final Four. I'm going to say Izzo finds a way to get it done there to prevent that. Then I got Florida over Duke in my title. So
I've got Florida over Houston in mine. So.
I could very well see that as well. Those will be battles of games. So, Coach, always enjoy the time, man. We'll be catching up here again soon, either to react to the first round game or the second round game, wherever we get caught back up here. We will have something in some way, shape, or form, probably Friday morning here after the Louisville Creighton game tomorrow. So, for Coach Lieberman, I'm Jack.